It was a gray and rainy Tuesday afternoon in New York City. The sky was heavy with thick clouds, and the rain was coming down in constant cold sheets, making the busy streets look like a blur of gray and yellow taxicabs. In the middle of this typical city chaos, a man stepped out of a simple, dark sedan. He didn't have a team of bodyguards surrounding him, and there were no screaming fans waiting behind barriers. He was alone. The man pulled the hood of his sweatshirt up over his head to shield himself from the rain. He kept his head down, looking at the wet sidewalk as he walked toward a tall, glass building. If you looked quickly, you might have thought he was just another tired person trying to get out of the weather. He was wearing old, scuffed boots, loose-fitting gray sweatpants, and a jacket that had definitely seen better days. His beard was a bit unkempt, and his hair was messy. He looked like someone who hadn't slept in his own bed for days. This was Keanu Reeves. But to the people rushing past him on the sidewalk, holding umbrellas and checking their watches, he was invisible. That was exactly how he wanted it. Keanu pushed the heavy glass door of the medical building and stepped inside. The air instantly changed from the cold, wet city air to the warm, dry smell of a waiting room. It was a smell of antiseptic, old magazines, and coffee. The clinic was busy. Every chair in the large waiting area seemed to be filled with people who were coughing, reading, or staring blankly at televisions mounted on the walls. There was a low hum of conversation in the room, mixed with the sound of a receptionist typing on a keyboard and a phone ringing somewhere in the back. It was a place where people came when they were worried about their health, and the tension in the air was thick. No one really wants to be at a doctor's office, especially on a rainy afternoon. Keanu walked slowly across the tiled floor. He walked with a slight limp, favoring his right side. He had been working extremely hard lately. For months, he had been training for a new movie, performing his own stunts, pushing his body to the absolute limit. He was famous for doing his own fight scenes and dangerous jumps, refusing to use a stunt double for the hard work. But the body can only take so much, and recently his back had been hurting him constantly. It was a sharp, shooting pain that made it hard to sit, hard to stand, and hard to sleep. Today, the pain was worse than usual. It felt like a hot iron was pressing against his spine. He finally made it to the reception desk. He stood quietly for a moment, waiting for the woman behind the counter to look up. She was busy talking on the phone, her voice sounding annoyed as she discussed an insurance issue. Keanu didn't tap his fingers or sigh. He just waited patiently, his hands resting in the pockets of his hoodie. After a minute, the receptionist hung up the phone and looked at him. Her eyes scanned him quickly. She saw the dirty boots, the worn-out clothes, and the tired face. She didn't see a movie star. She didn't see the man who had starred in some of the biggest action movies in history. She just saw a man who looked like he might be down on his luck. "Can I help you?" she asked, her voice flat and professional. "Yeah, hi," Keanu said softly. His voice was raspy and quiet. He had a way of speaking that made him sound shy and gentle. "I have an appointment at 2:30. The name is Keanu." The receptionist typed the name into her computer. She frowned a little, looking at the screen. "Keanu Reeves?" She read slowly, looking up at him with a skeptical look, as if she didn't believe it could be him. Keanu nodded slightly. "Yes, that's me." She paused for a second, looking at his messy hair and simple clothes. It didn't add up in her mind. She expected someone named Keanu Reeves to look more expensive, but she didn't say anything. She just printed out a label and stuck it on a clipboard. "Fill this out," she said, sliding the clipboard across the counter. "Take a seat. The doctor is running a bit late today." "Thanks," Keanu said. He took the clipboard and a pen. He turned around and looked for a seat. The waiting room was crowded. There were mothers with crying children, elderly people holding canes, and businessmen in suits typing on laptops. Keanu found an empty plastic chair in the corner, away from the main flow of traffic. He sat down carefully. Wincing as the pain in his back flared up when he lowered himself, he picked up the pen and started filling out the paperwork. Name, address, emergency contact. It was the same boring paperwork he had filled out 100 times before in hospitals all over the world. As he wrote, a teenager sitting a few chairs away looked at him. The boy squinted his eyes, tilting his head. He looked at Keanu, then at a movie poster on the wall, then back at Keanu. The boy looked confused, like he was trying to solve a puzzle. Keanu noticed the boy looking. He didn't smile or wave. He just pulled his hood forward a little more and focused on the paper. He didn't want to be recognized right now. He wasn't here to sign autographs or take selfies. He was just a regular guy who was in a lot of pain and wanted some help. He valued his privacy more than anything, and in a world where everyone has a camera in their pocket, being invisible was a superpower he tried to master. He finished the paperwork and walked back to the desk. The receptionist took it without really looking at him and pointed back to the chairs. "We'll call you when we're ready." Keanu went back to his corner. He leaned his head back against the wall and closed his eyes for a moment. He could hear the rain tapping against the window behind him. He thought about how tired he was. He loved his job, he really did. He loved telling stories and making movies that made people happy. But sometimes the fame was exhausting. People judged you before they even knew you. They thought they owned you because they had seen your face on a screen. Here, in this waiting room, nobody cared about the movies. They just cared about their own problems. And honestly, Keanu preferred it that way. He just wanted to be treated like a human being, not a celebrity. He watched an old man struggle to stand up to get a drink of water, and he thought about getting up to help, but his back seized up, stopping him. It made him feel helpless. Time passed slowly. The clock on the wall ticked loudly. Minutes turned into half an hour. Finally, the door to the inner exam rooms opened. A nurse in blue scrubs stepped out holding a file. "Keanu?" She called out, looking around the room. Keanu opened his eyes and stood up. He grabbed his jacket and walked toward her. "Right here," he said. The nurse smiled at him, a kind, genuine smile. "Come on back, honey. Let's get you fixed up." She led him down a long, narrow hallway. The lights here were brighter, buzzing with a fluorescent hum. They passed rooms with closed doors, the sounds of muffled coughing and medical machines coming from inside. Keanu walked slowly, trying to hide the fact that every step hurt. At the very end of the hall, the nurse opened a door and ushered him inside. It was a small room with an examination table covered in crisp white paper. There were posters of human anatomy on the walls and a sink in the corner. "Have a seat," the nurse said. "The doctor will be with you shortly. You can take off your jacket if you like." "Thanks," Keanu said. The nurse left, closing the door behind her. Keanu was left alone in the silence of the small room. He took off his wet jacket and hung it on the back of the chair. He sat down on the edge of the exam table. The paper crinkled loudly under him. He looked around the sterile room and let out a long breath. He hoped the doctor would be nice. He hoped they could give him something for the pain so he could go back to work. He didn't ask for much. He sat there, listening to the sound of his own breathing, completely unaware that the quiet moment he was enjoying was about to be shattered. Outside in the hallway, footsteps were approaching. They were fast, heavy footsteps. The silence was about to break, and Keanu's patience was about to be tested in a way he never expected. He was just a man in a room waiting for help, but the person walking through that door wasn't coming to help him, at least, not in the way a doctor should. The silence in the small, sterile exam room didn't last long. It was broken by the sudden, sharp sound of the doorknob turning. The door didn't open slowly or gently. It swung inward with a force that made it bang against the rubber stopper on the wall. Keanu flinched slightly, not out of fear, but simply because the noise was so sudden. In the quiet space, a man strode into the room. He was wearing a crisp white lab coat over a pressed shirt and expensive-looking dress trousers. He carried a tablet under one arm and a cup of coffee in the other hand. He looked every bit the successful, important medical professional. He had neat hair and a watch that looked like it cost more than most people's cars. He didn't look at Keanu immediately. Instead, he was looking down at his tablet, tapping the screen aggressively with his thumb. He walked past Keanu without saying a word, went to the small sink in the corner, and put his coffee down. "I'll be with you in a second," the doctor said, his voice cold and busy. He didn't turn around. He just started scrubbing his hands at the sink, the water running loudly. "These records are a mess." The front desk never gets anything right. Keanu sat quietly on the exam table, the paper crinkling under his legs. He watched the water swirl down the drain. He took a deep breath, trying to steady himself. He was used to waiting. He was used to people being busy. But he could feel a tension in the air that wasn't usually there, finally. The doctor turned off the water, dried his hands on a rough paper towel, and turned around. He looked up, his eyes finally landing on Keanu. The doctor stopped drying his hands. He stood there for a moment, his eyes scanning Keanu from top to bottom. He looked at the messy hair, the days-old beard, the worn-out sweatshirt, and the dirty boots. The doctor let out a long, annoyed sigh. He shook his head slightly, like he was disappointed. "Okay," the doctor said, walking over to the computer on the desk and typing something quickly. "You're the one with the back pain, correct? The paperwork says Keanu, but I assume that's a typo or a nickname." "No," Keanu said softly. "That's my name." The doctor scoffed, a short, humorless laugh. "Right, sure." He still didn't look at Keanu with any kindness. He treated him like a nuisance. "Okay, let's make this quick. I have actual patients waiting. Sit up straight, or as straight as you can." Keanu tried to adjust his posture. The pain shot through his spine like a lightning bolt, causing him to gasp quietly and grab the edge of the table. His knuckles turned white. "You see?" The doctor said, not with sympathy, but with accusation. He walked over and poked Keanu hard in the shoulder with one finger. It wasn't a medical exam touch. It was rough and rude. "This is what happens when you abuse your body." "I see this all the time." The doctor started pacing around the small room. "You think you can stay out all night, do whatever it is you do, and then come here expecting a magic pill to fix it. Medicine isn't magic. It's science. And you can't science your way out of a destroyed lifestyle." Keanu blinked, confused. I heard it at work," he tried to explain. "Work?" The doctor spun around, his voice getting louder. "What work? Hauling heavy things you shouldn't be lifting? Sleeping in odd positions?" He gestured at Keanu's clothes. "Look at you. When was the last time you had a proper meal? When was the last time you showered?" Keanu looked down at his boots. He felt his face getting hot. He was a humble man, someone who usually didn't care what people thought of his clothes. He wore what was comfortable. He didn't need expensive suits to feel good about himself. But being judged like this, in a place where he was supposed to be helped, felt terrible. He wanted to explain that he had just come from training, that he was tired, that he was in pain. But he could tell the doctor wasn't interested in listening. "I don't understand," Keanu said quietly. "It's pretty simple," the doctor said, leaning against the counter and crossing his arms. He looked down his nose at Keanu. "People like you come in here with a sense of entitlement. You think the world owes you something. You think you can neglect your health and then waltz in here, taking up time that could be spent on people who actually take care of themselves." The doctor walked closer, invading Keanu's personal space. "I can smell the exhaustion on you. It's not just physical. It's the look of someone who has no direction, no purpose. You probably don't even have a job, do you? Just floating through life, relying on the system when things get tough." Keanu stayed silent. He gripped the edge of the table tighter. He thought about his work schedule. He thought about the 14-hour days on set, the choreography, the rehearsals, the charity work he did anonymously. He thought about the millions of dollars his movies made, which provided jobs for thousands of people. No purpose? He thought. But he didn't say any of that. He knew that arguing with this man would only make it worse. He just wanted to know what was wrong with his back. The doctor took the silence as an admission of guilt. "Exactly," he said, nodding his head. "You have nothing to say for yourself because you know I'm right." He grabbed a reflex hammer from the counter and smacked it against his own palm a few times. "Turn around and let me check your reflexes, or whatever is left of them." Keanu slowly turned his back to the doctor. The doctor didn't gently lift his shirt. He yanked the fabric up roughly, exposing Keanu's lower back. The air in the room felt cold against his skin. The doctor poked and prodded with zero care for Keanu's comfort. Every poke sent a wave of pain through Keanu's body, but he refused to cry out. He bit the inside of his cheek, tasting a tiny bit of coppery blood. "This muscle tone is terrible," the doctor muttered, mostly to himself but loud enough for Keanu to hear. "It's like jelly? You're weak. You're probably malnourished. It's pathetic, really. A grown man letting himself go like this." He finished the rough exam and pulled Keanu's shirt back down with a shove. "Okay, turn back around." Keanu turned back to face him. His face was calm, but his eyes were sad. "Here is the diagnosis," the doctor said, throwing his hands up in the air. "Your back hurts because you are living an unhealthy life. You need to stand up straight. You need to get a real job, one that doesn't involve destroying your body. You need to buy some clothes that fit and maybe a bar of soap." The doctor walked to the door and opened it, signaling that the appointment was over. "I'm not giving you pain medication. You don't need drugs to mask a problem you created. Go home, sleep in a real bed. Get your act together. And don't come back until you have some respect for yourself and for this profession." Keanu sat there for a moment, stunned. He had been treated rudely before, but this was different. This was pure, unfiltered hatred from a stranger who didn't know a single thing about him. It was the kind of judgment that people who struggle with homelessness or poverty face every single day. Even though Keanu had millions in the bank, sitting on that paper table in his old clothes, he felt the heavy weight of that judgment. He felt for anyone who had to sit in that chair and listen to this. He slowly slid off the table, his feet hitting the cold floor. He stood up, wincing again. He picked up his worn jacket. Is there anything else I can do?" Keanu asked, his voice sounding small in the large room. He wasn't asking for himself. He was genuinely asking if there was any medical advice for the pain. The doctor laughed, a dry, cruel sound. "I just told you what to do. Listen to me for once. Leave. Now, I have important patients to see." With that, the doctor turned his back on Keanu and started typing furiously on the computer, ignoring him completely. The dismissal was total. Keanu stood there for a few seconds longer. He looked at the back of the doctor's head. A part of him wanted to say something. He wanted to tell him that he was wrong, that he was being incredibly rude and unprofessional. He wanted to say, "I'm Keanu Reeves. I make movies that people love. I work harder than almost anyone you know." But he didn't. He realized that saying that would just sound like an ego trip. It wouldn't teach the doctor anything. The doctor had already made up his mind based on a hoodie and a pair of boots. If Keanu revealed his fame now, the doctor would probably just switch from being hateful to being a fake sycophant, apologizing just because he was famous. And Keanu didn't want a fake apology. He wanted people to be decent simply because it was the right thing to do. So Keanu stayed silent. He was the picture of calm. He took a slow, deep breath, letting the anger and the hurt wash out of him. He didn't want to carry that negativity with him. He put his jacket on slowly, wincing as he moved his arms. He zipped it up halfway, just like he always did. He picked up his helmet, which he had placed on the chair. Keanu looked at the doctor one last time. The doctor didn't even turn around. "Thank you for your time," Keanu said. He meant it in a way. Not because the doctor was good, but because Keanu was a polite man raised to have manners. Keanu turned and walked toward the door. The pain in his back was throbbing with every step, but he walked with a quiet dignity. He wasn't a bum, and he wasn't a victim. He was just a man who knew who he was. Even if the guy in the white coat didn't single quotes dot, he opened the door and stepped out into the hallway. The door clicked shut behind him, cutting off the sound of the doctor's typing. The hallway was long and empty. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead. Keanu stood in the hallway for a moment, leaning against the wall to catch his breath. He rubbed his lower back, trying to soothe the ache. He felt disappointed. The heavy glass door was just inches away. Keanu could see the rain still beating against the pavement outside. He could almost feel the cool, wet air on his face. He wanted to push the handle and walk out into the storm. He wanted to get on his motorcycle and ride until the wind drowned out the doctor's harsh words. But the voice behind him was desperate. It wasn't the voice of someone who wanted to argue. It was the voice of someone who wanted to make things right. Keanu stopped. His hand lingered on the door handle for a second before he let it drop to his side. He turned around slowly, careful not to twist his aching back too sharply. The head nurse was rushing toward him. She was a middle-aged woman with kind eyes that were currently wide with shock and embarrassment. She was holding a manila folder so tightly her knuckles were white. She stopped a few feet away from him, slightly out of breath. "Sir," she said, her voice trembling just a little. "Please, wait. You can't leave like this." Keanu looked at her gently. He tucked his hands into the pockets of his hoodie. "It's okay," he said softly. "I really just need to go. The doctor—" He made his feelings very clear. "I don't want to cause any trouble." "You aren't causing trouble," the nurse insisted. She stepped closer, lowering her voice so the people in the waiting room wouldn't hear. "I was at the desk. I saw the file. I know who you are. And I heard what he said to you in there." She looked toward the hallway where the exam rooms were, her face flushing with anger. "It was unacceptable. It was unprofessional. And I am so sorry." Keanu shrugged slightly, a small sad smile touching his lips. "I've heard worse," he said, trying to lighten the mood. "I'm okay, really. Please don't worry about it." "I do worry," the nurse said firmly. "That doctor, he has an ego the size of this city. He thinks he can treat anyone who looks different like dirt. It makes me sick." She looked at Keanu's tired face. "You are a human being. You deserve kindness, no matter what you're wearing or what your name is. But he didn't even give you a chance." Just then, the heavy wooden door of the exam room swung open again. The arrogant doctor stepped out into the hallway. He looked annoyed. He was holding a tablet and looking around the nurse's station. "Where's the file for the homeless guy?" The doctor shouted, not caring who heard him. "I need to finish my notes, and I need someone to sanitize that room." He smelled like stale rain and bad decisions. The waiting room went silent. Everyone stopped what they were doing to look at the doctor. Even the receptionist stopped typing. The head nurse froze. She looked from the doctor back to Keanu. She saw that Keanu was looking at the floor, trying to stay invisible. The sight of him standing there, taking the abuse even after he had tried to leave, made something snap inside her. She had worked at this clinic for 20 years, and she had watched this doctor belittle patients, interns, and janitors alike. But this was too far. She turned on her heel and marched over to the doctor. Keanu watched her go. He felt a mix of gratitude and anxiety. He didn't want a scene. He just wanted peace. The nurse stood right in front of the doctor, blocking his path. She held up the file in her hand. "Don't you ever speak about a patient like that again," she said. Her voice low but steel hard. The doctor looked at her in surprise. He laughed. "Excuse me?" He walked out on his treatment. "He's a waste of resources?" "I'm just stating facts." "You are stating nothing but your own ignorance," the nurse fired back. She was trembling now, but with rage. "Do you know who that is? Do you have any idea who you just kicked out of your office?" The doctor rolled his eyes and crossed his arms. "Let me guess. Another struggling artist? A wannabe actor? They are a dime a dozen in this city. They all think they are special." "He is not a wannabe," the nurse said, her voice rising slightly. "His name is Keanu Reeves." The doctor paused. He frowned. He looked over the nurse's shoulder toward the exit door where Keanu was still standing, half hidden in the shadows of his hood. The doctor looked back at the nurse, confused. "Keanu Reeves?" The doctor repeated slowly. "The actor? The Matrix guy? That is impossible." "Check the file," she commanded, shoving the folder into his chest. "Look at the date of birth. Look at the insurance information. Look at the photo on the ID if you don't believe me. It is him. And you just told one of the most famous, most generous actors in the world that he has no purpose. You told him he smells." The doctor's face went pale. He quickly flipped open the folder. He scanned the page. He saw the name. He saw the contact information. He saw the emergency contact numbers listed for his agents in Hollywood. The blood seemed to drain from his face. His arrogant smirk vanished, replaced by a look of pure, unadulterated panic. He looked up again, but this time he looked at Keanu with new eyes. Suddenly, the messy hair wasn't a sign of being homeless. It was a style. The worn-out clothes weren't rags. They were expensive designer items made to look old. The tiredness in his eyes wasn't from laziness. It was from exhaustion after filming a blockbuster movie. The doctor's mind started racing. He knew who Keanu Reeves was. Everyone knew who he was. He knew about the billions of dollars his movies had made. He knew about the charity work, the hospitals funded, the children helped. He realized he had just insulted a man who had more class in his little finger than the doctor had in his entire body. And worse, he realized he had done it in his own place of business, with witnesses everywhere. Oh no, the doctor stammered. His voice cracked. He took a step back, almost tripping over his own feet. "Oh no is right," the nurse said, crossing her own arms now. She towered over him morally. "You just made a very big mistake. A mistake that is going to cost this clinic a lot more than a bad review." The doctor's eyes darted around the room. He saw the other patients staring at him. He saw the judgment on their faces. He saw phones coming out. Someone in the waiting room whispered, "Is that really John Wick?" The doctor's stomach dropped. He could already see the headlines. He could see the lawsuits. He could see his career going down the drain because he couldn't be bothered to be a decent human being for 5 minutes. I didn't recognize him," the doctor whispered, his excuse sounding pathetic even to his own ears. "That is the point." The nurse hissed, "You didn't recognize him as a human being, so it didn't matter who he was. You treated him like he was beneath you. And now you realize he is above you in society and you are scared. That makes you a coward." The doctor swallowed hard. He felt sweat beading on his forehead. He needed to fix this. He needed to fix it right now before Keanu walked out that door and told the world what happened. He knew the power of celebrity. He knew that one tweet from Keanu Reeves could destroy his reputation instantly. He looked at the nurse, panic in his eyes. "What do I do?" "You have to help me. I can't let him leave like this." "You can't stop him," the nurse said simply. "He's a free man. But if I were you, I would go over there and apologize. I would apologize like my life depended on it. And I would pray he is the forgiving man everyone says he is." The doctor took a deep, shaky breath. He straightened his lab coat. He tried to compose himself, to put back on his mask of importance, but his hands were trembling. He looked toward the exit. Keanu was still standing there. He hadn't moved. He was watching the scene unfold with a calm, stoic expression. He had heard the nurse defend him. He had heard the doctor realize the truth. He saw the fear on the doctor's face. It would have been so easy for Keanu to yell at him. It would have been easy to shout, "Do you know who I am now?" It would have been satisfying to humiliate the man the way he had been humiliated. But Keanu didn't feel any satisfaction. He just felt tired. He felt sad that it took fame and money to make the doctor treat him with respect. The doctor started walking toward him. The clinic was deadly silent. You could hear a pin drop. Every eye was on the interaction. The doctor walked slowly, his steps heavy. When he reached Keanu, he stopped. He looked smaller than he had 5 minutes ago. He looked deflated. "Mr. Reeves," the doctor said. His voice was weak. It was nothing like the booming, confident voice he had used in the exam room. I am so sorry. I made a terrible mistake." Keanu looked at him. He didn't say anything. He just waited. The doctor continued, his words tumbling out in a rush. "I didn't recognize you. You look so different in person. And your clothes." I jumped to the wrong conclusion. I was incredibly rude. I was unprofessional. Please forgive me. Come back inside. I will give you the best exam. I will call in a specialist. Anything you want. It's on the house." The doctor was practically begging. He was offering free VIP treatment, the very thing he had mocked earlier. The irony was thick in the air. The man who had told Keanu to get a job was now trying to save his own job. Keanu looked deep into the doctor's eyes. He saw the fear, but he also saw that the doctor still didn't really get it. The doctor wasn't apologizing for being rude to a person. He was apologizing for being rude to a rich and famous person. If Keanu were actually a homeless man, the doctor wouldn't be standing here apologizing. He would still be in the break room complaining about the smell. Keanu finally took his hands out of his pockets. He stood up straight, ignoring the pain in his back that throbbed in protest. "Doctor," Keanu said, his voice calm and steady. It cut through the tension like a knife. "You're right about one thing." The doctor blinked. "Conf." The glass door clicked shut, sealing the clinic off from the cold wind and the gloomy afternoon. But inside, the atmosphere was heavy, much heavier than the storm outside. The silence that filled the room was deafening. It wasn't a peaceful silence. It was the kind that settles in after a loud explosion. When everyone is too stunned to speak, the doctor stood frozen in the middle of the waiting room. He was still looking at the door where Keanu had disappeared, his mouth slightly open as if he wanted to call out one last time, but his voice had failed him. He could feel the eyes of every single person in the room burning into him. The grandmother in the corner was shaking her head. The businessman had put his phone down completely. Even the young child had stopped crying, sensing the shift in the air. The doctor's face felt hot. A bead of sweat rolled down his temple. He adjusted his collar, but it felt too tight. He looked down at his expensive shoes, then at his hands that were supposed to heal, but today had only caused harm. He felt naked, exposed. The armor of his white coat and his medical degree felt useless against the truth that had just been spoken. Slowly, he turned around to face the nurse's station. The head nurse was standing there, her arms crossed, looking at him with a mixture of disappointment and pity. She didn't say a word. She didn't have to. Her eyes said everything that needed to be said. She turned her back on him and began organizing files on the counter, effectively dismissing him just as he had dismissed Keanu moments earlier. I need a moment," the doctor mumbled to no one in particular. His voice sounded weak, nothing like the booming, arrogant tone he had used earlier. He walked quickly toward his office, his strides uneven. He could feel the judgment of the patients trailing him like a shadow. He passed by the examination room where it had all happened. The door was open and the room was empty. The paper on the table was crinkled where Keanu had sat. The discarded alcohol wipes were still in the trash can. The room felt haunted by the man's quiet dignity. The doctor went inside and closed the door firmly, locking it. He leaned his back against the wood and slid down until he was sitting on the floor. He put his head in his hands. For a man who prided himself on being smart, he felt incredibly stupid. How could he have been so wrong? He replayed the last hour in his mind. He saw the messy hair, the dirty boots, the tired eyes. In his arrogance, he had seen a failure. He had seen a drain on society. He had used his position of power to bully someone who couldn't fight back. It was a power trip, plain and simple. And he had paid the price for it, but it wasn't about the fame. The doctor realized that slowly. The terror he felt wasn't just about being sued or losing his job because he was rude to a celebrity. It was deeper than that. It was the realization of his own cruelty. Keanu's words echoed in his mind. Asterisk, if I was the man you thought I was, I would still deserve to be treated like a human being. Asterisk, the doctor stood up and walked to his desk. His hands were shaking as he reached for the computer mouse. He needed to know. He needed to understand the man he had just insulted. He opened the web browser and typed Keanu Reeves into the search bar. Screen after screen popped up. It wasn't just movie posters and red carpet photos. The doctor scrolled, his eyes widening. He saw articles about Keanu donating millions of dollars to children's hospitals. He saw stories about Keanu starting a private cancer foundation without putting his name on it just to help people. He read about how Keanu had taken pay cuts on his movies so that the production companies could afford to hire better special effects crews. He saw a photo of Keanu sitting on a park bench, eating a sandwich alone, looking exactly as he had looked in the clinic today, humble, approachable, real. The doctor felt a lump form in his throat. He had told this man that he had no purpose. He had told him that he was wasting space. The irony was so bitter it tasted like ash in his mouth. Keanu Reeves had probably done more for the world in the last week than the doctor had done in his entire career. And yet, the doctor had treated him like garbage. Keanu hadn't bragged. He hadn't pulled rank. He had just taken the insult and then walked away with his head held high. The doctor leaned back in his leather chair, looking around his office. The walls were covered with his diplomas and awards. Certificates that proved he was smart, that proved he was successful. But suddenly, they looked like just pieces of paper. They didn't prove he was a good man. Meanwhile, outside the clinic, the world was moving on. Keanu walked down the street, the rain soaking through his hoodie. The cold air actually felt good on his face. It cleared his head. His back was throbbing, a sharp, rhythmic pain that made him grit his teeth with every step, but he didn't stop walking. He needed to put distance between himself and that building. He didn't feel angry anymore. He just felt a profound sense of disappointment for the human race. He wondered how many other people that doctor had hurt. How many people who weren't famous had walked out of that room feeling small, feeling worthless, feeling like they didn't matter. It broke his heart a little. Keanu turned a corner and saw a small diner. The lights were warm inside, casting a yellow glow on the wet sidewalk. He decided to stop. He needed to sit down. He needed to figure out his next move. He opened the door to the diner. A bell chimed. The place was mostly empty, just a few people in booths drinking coffee. Keanu walked to a stool at the counter and sat down heavily. Letting out a breath he felt like he'd been holding in for an hour. The waitress, a young woman with bright pink hair and a tired smile, walked over with a pot of coffee. She didn't look at him like he was a star. She didn't look at him like he was a bum. She just looked at him like he was a customer. "Hi there," she said cheerfully. "Rough day?" Keanu looked up at her and managed a small, genuine smile. "You could say that," he said. "Just one of those days." "I hear that," she said, pouring him a cup. "This weather makes everyone gloomy. What can I get you?" "Just water, please," Keanu said. "And maybe a muffin if you have one. Coming right up." As she walked away, Keanu pulled his phone out of his pocket. He scrolled through his contacts. He needed to find a specialist. He couldn't go back to that clinic, obviously. He needed someone who could help him without judging him. He dialed a number. It was his friend, a chiropractor he had known for years. "Hey," Keanu said when the line picked up. "It's me, Keanu. How are you, man?" "Not so good," Keanu admitted. "My back is killing me. I think I really messed it up this time." "Ouch, where are you?" "Near the medical district. I had a bad experience at a clinic. I need to find somewhere else." "Say no more," his friend said. "Go to this address. It's a sports medicine place. Dr. Evans, she's the best. She doesn't care who you are, she just fixes you. I'll text you the info." "Thanks," Keanu said. "I really appreciate it." "No problem. And hey, take care of yourself. Don't let the city get you down." Keanu hung up. A moment later, the address popped up on his screen. It was a few blocks away. He looked at the reflection of himself in the darkened window of the diner. He saw the messy beard, the hood, the sad eyes. He looked exactly the same as he had when he walked into the clinic. He hadn't changed his clothes. He hadn't suddenly put on a tuxedo. And yet, in here, he was just a guy getting a muffin. He realized that the doctor back at the clinic had a sickness. It wasn't a physical sickness that could be fixed with medicine. It was a sickness of the spirit. The doctor relied on labels to understand the world. If you wear a suit, you are important. If you wear a hoodie, you are nothing. But Keanu knew the truth. The suit doesn't make the man. The money doesn't make the man. It's how you treat people when no one is watching. The waitress came back with the water and the blueberry muffin. "Here you go, honey. It's on the house. You look like you could use a sugar rush." Keanu looked at her, surprised. "Oh, you don't have to do that." "I want to," she insisted. "We all have bad days. Hopefully this turns yours around." Keanu felt a warmth spread through his chest that had nothing to do with the coffee shop. This kindness from a stranger earning minimum wage was worth more than the fancy apology the doctor had tried to offer. "Thank you," Keanu said, looking her in the eyes. "This means a lot." He ate the muffin slowly, savoring the sweetness. He drank the water. He paid for the coffee, leaving a large tip on the counter despite her offer of the free muffin. He didn't do it to show off. He did it because he believed in generosity. Back at the clinic, the sun was starting to set. The waiting room had emptied out. The doctor was still in his office. He hadn't seen any more patients. He just couldn't bring himself to open the door. He sat in the darkening room, thinking about his career. He had spent so many years trying to impress the important people. He tried to impress hospital administrators, donors, and socialites. He treated the regular people like obstacles. And today, the most important person to walk into his life was the one he treated the worst. He stood up and walked to the window. He looked out at the street. He saw the city lights flickering on. He saw the thousands of people walking home from work. He saw a homeless man pushing a cart down the street. For the first time in years, the doctor didn't see a nuisance. He saw a person. He saw a story. He saw someone who might be carrying a heavy burden, just like the man in the hoodie had been. The doctor took a deep breath. He knew he couldn't change what. The night had fully settled over the city by the time Keanu arrived at the address his friend had sent him. The rain had finally stopped, leaving the wet streets reflecting the neon signs and the headlights of passing cars. It was a different part of the medical district, quieter, less flashy than the massive clinic he had left earlier. The building was a modern brick structure with a simple sign that read, "Sports Medicine and Wellness Center." Keanu walked up to the glass door. He was tired, more tired than he had been in a long time. His back was throbbing with a constant, dull ache that made his leg feel numb, but his mind felt strangely clear. He pushed the door open and stepped inside. The contrast to the previous place was immediate. The air smelled of eucalyptus and lemon, not antiseptic and old coffee. The lights were dimmer, warmer. Instead of a crowded waiting room with people glaring at each other, there was a calm, open space with soft music playing. There were a few comfortable chairs and plants in the corners. It felt like a place where people actually went to get better, not just to fill out forms. Keanu walked to the reception desk. A young man was sitting there, reading a book. He looked up and smiled warmly. He didn't look at Keanu's clothes or his messy hair. He just saw a person. "Good evening," the receptionist said. "How can we help you?" "Hi," Keanu said, his voice raspy. "I have an appointment. I'm a walk-in, actually. A friend recommended Dr. Evans." "Ah, yes," the receptionist said, checking his computer. "We have you on the list? Just go right through that door, second room on the left. Dr. Evans is finishing up with someone and will be right in." "Thanks," Keanu said. He walked down the hallway, his footsteps echoing softly on the polished floor. He found the room and walked in. It was similar to the other exam room with a table and chairs, but it felt cleaner, brighter. There was a poster on the wall showing a diagram of the human spine, but it looked more like art than a medical chart. He sat down on the chair instead of the table. He didn't want to climb up onto the paper again just yet. He leaned his head back and closed his eyes, listening to the silence. He felt safe here. A few minutes later, the door opened. A woman walked in. She was tall, with her hair pulled back in a practical ponytail. She wore scrubs and sneakers. She was holding a tablet, but she wasn't typing furiously on it. She was looking at Keanu. "Hi, I'm Dr. Evans," she said, extending a hand. "You must be Keanu." Keanu stood up and shook her hand. Her grip was firm but gentle. "Nice to meet you." "Have a seat," she said, gesturing to the exam table. "I hear you're having some back trouble. My friend said you've been working pretty hard lately." Keanu smiled a little. "Something like that." He climbed onto the table. The paper crinkled, but it didn't sound annoying this time. Dr. Evans pulled a stool over and sat down so she was eye level with him. She didn't stand over him. She didn't look down on him. "Tell me what happened," she said simply. For the next 10 minutes, Keanu talked. He told her about the stunts, the fighting, the falling, the long hours. He didn't have to brag, and he didn't have to complain. She listened to every word. She asked questions that were smart and specific. She touched his back with hands that were careful and respectful. When he winced in pain, she stopped immediately. "I'm sorry," she said softly. "I know that hurts. We're going to fix it." She didn't judge him. She didn't tell him he was stupid for hurting himself. She didn't tell him to stop working. She just focused on the problem. After a thorough exam, she stood up. "Well, it looks like you have a severe strain in your lower lumbar region. There's some inflammation pressing on a nerve. It's painful, but it's not permanent damage if we treat it right." She started typing on her tablet. "I'm going to give you a prescription for an anti-inflammatory. I'm also going to refer you to a physical therapist who specializes in sports injuries. And I can do a manipulation right now to help with the immediate pressure." Keanu let out a breath he didn't know he was holding. "That sounds, amazing. Thank you." "I need to ask," she said, looking at him over the rim of her glasses. "Did you see another doctor before this? The way you were holding yourself when you came in, you looked like you were expecting to be yelled at." Keanu looked down at his hands. "I was," he said quietly. "I had a bad experience earlier. At a different clinic." "It doesn't matter." Dr. Evans frowned. "It does matter. Doctors are here to help, not to judge. I'm sorry you had to go through that. No one deserves that, especially when they are in pain." She walked over to a cabinet and prepared a small injection to help with the inflammation. "This might sting a bit," she warned. "I'm used to it," Keanu said with a small smile. She administered the shot quickly and expertly. Then she did some gentle stretches and manipulations on his back. Keanu felt a pop and then a release. The sharp, shooting pain that had been traveling down his leg began to fade into a dull throb. It was like magic, but it wasn't magic. It was just good care. "All done," she said, washing her hands. "Take it easy for a few days. No fighting, no falling, okay?" "I'll try my best," Keanu said. He hopped off the table and tested his back. He stood up straighter than he had in weeks. He felt taller. He felt lighter. He walked to the door and turned back. "Dr. Evans? Yes?" "Thank you," Keanu said, looking her in the eye, "for treating me like a person." "That's my job, Keanu," she said simply. "Take care of yourself." He walked out of the clinic into the cool night air. He took a deep breath. The city noise sounded different now, less like a chaotic mess and more like the heartbeat of a place he loved. He put his helmet on, straddled his motorcycle, and started the engine. The hum of the bike vibrated through him, but it didn't hurt. He felt good. He felt ready to go home and sleep. Meanwhile, back at the first clinic, the lights were still on in one office. The arrogant doctor was sitting at his desk, but the room was dark except for the light of his computer screen. He had been sitting there for hours. He had watched the sunset and the city lights turn on. He had replayed the day over and over again in his mind. He felt ashamed. It was a heavy, sinking feeling in his gut. He had built his entire career on being the best. He had the most degrees, the most expensive equipment, the highest fees. He thought being the best meant knowing the most. But today he realized he didn't know anything at all. He didn't know the first thing about being a doctor. He stood up and walked to the window. He looked down at the street below. He saw the same homeless man he had seen earlier pushing a shopping cart full of blankets. In the past, the doctor would have looked away, or felt annoyed that the man was blocking the sidewalk, but tonight he didn't look away. He watched the man stop to pick up a plastic bottle from the gutter. He watched the man adjust a blanket to cover a shivering dog that was walking beside him. The doctor saw a human being struggling to survive. He saw a story. He thought about Keanu. He thought about how Keanu had stood there in his old hoodie, taking the insults without fighting back. The doctor had mistaken silence for weakness. But now he understood that Keanu's silence was strength. It was the strength of a man who didn't need to shout to prove his worth. "I was wrong," the doctor whispered into the empty room. It was a hard admission, the hardest he had ever made. "I was wrong about everything." The next morning, the clinic opened as usual. The receptionist came in and the nurses started their shifts. The arrogant doctor walked out of his office. He looked tired. He didn't have his usual confident swagger. He looked like a man who had seen a ghost. A few hours later, an elderly woman walked into the clinic. She was wearing a faded coat and carrying a torn tote bag. She looked nervous. She approached the reception desk. "Excuse me," she said softly. "I have an appointment with Dr. Smith, but I might be a little early. I can wait." The receptionist looked at the schedule. "Dr. Smith is with a patient. You can have a seat." The old woman sat down in the corner. She looked around the room, clutching her bag tight. She felt out of place among the suits and the expensive purses. Suddenly, the door to the inner hallway opened. Dr. Smith, the arrogant doctor from the day before, stepped out. He looked tired. He had his head down, looking at a file. "Mrs. Gable?" he called out. The old woman stood up quickly. "Yes, I'm here." Dr. Smith looked up. He saw her tattered coat. He saw her nervous hands. He saw the way she was trying to make herself small, invisible. For a split second, the old habit tried to kick in. The urge to judge, to rush, to dismiss. But then he saw a flash of a worn-out hoodie in his mind. He heard Keanu's quiet voice. Asterisk, I would still deserve to be treated like a human being. Asterisk, Dr. Smith stopped. He took a deep breath. He smiled. It wasn't a fake smile. It was a genuine, warm smile. "No rush, Mrs. Gable," he said kindly. He walked over to her, not standing above her, but meeting her eyes. "I'm glad you're here. It's good to see you. I have some tea brewing in the back. Would you like a cup before we go in? It might be a few minutes." The old woman blinked in surprise. Oh, that would be very nice. Thank you." "Coming right up," Dr. Smith said. He walked past the nurse's station. The head nurse watched him go. She saw him get the tea. She saw him bring it to the old woman and help her sit down. She saw him listening to her with patience and care. It wasn't a performance. It wasn't because the woman was famous. It was just because she was there. The nurse smiled to herself. She didn't know what had happened.